Yeah.
And condition onto themselves and even other people, right? Like the cause of like being fearful of other people, I'll never know like how or why we do this. But there was like a video that I saw recently of a teacher who was like, everyone wants to know like what my kids call me as a non-binary person. And she goes, they go, kids, like what do you call me? And it was like teacher Adelaide or something, like no gender, no.
Mhm.
And like that's amazing.
I love
Yeah.
that so much.
Yeah.
I love all of the I love all the like non-binary terms for different,
Yes.
different like people in
our language has been so limited in the past. I think it's awesome that we're trying to expand it. And kids don't care. Kids
exactly. That's the
they
point. Like
want to have fun and love everybody. You know, it's the grown-ups that screw everything up. I do a lot of work with kids. I teach a lot of kids. We do an anti-bullying project where we work with young people who've been through a lot of bullying and make art about it. And you know, these young people are amazing. They are figuring out who they are, or they're saying, I don't have to figure out who I am just yet. I'm just going to be open to everything. And that's awesome too, you know?
I love that so much.
That we didn't have, that I didn't have.
Yeah. What words would you two offer to parents of young queer and trans humans?
I would say that as a parent, it's your job to love and support your kids and to create a space for them to be and to become whoever it is they're supposed to be. Being a parent doesn't mean you own this person. It means you've given them life and you're part of their family, but your role is to love them and accept them and to allow them to be themselves. And even though it might be scary and you might be worried about whatever you might be worried about, their safety, their or are you worried about how it might reflect on you? And that's something that you have to deal with yourself. You can't put that onto your kids. So just try to prioritize your kids' happiness and health and safety, and allow them to be themselves, because they're wonderful individual people. And these kids, they have so much personality at such a young age. You know, they're already starting to become whoever it is they are. It's not up to you to tell them. They're gonna find their way.
I completely agree with you, Paul. I'm doing some inner child therapy work right now, and a lot of I'll say my triggers are around like not feeling advocated for or not feeling shown up for, and how those things trigger into like my day-to-day, where it's like, oh, my boss didn't respond to my email. I'm having a panic because I don't feel supported, and how that connects to my little Shayna, right?
Yeah.
So for me, advice to parents would be show up for your child, whoever they decide to be that day, and be an advocate for them. Like if you're nervous about what the school's going to think, well, you change the school and you find an app, like you are your advocate. You show up for your kid in every way, you know, and everything that you said, Paul, like love them and show up for them. And that statement is no reflection to my mom's parenthood at all. My mom showed up. if she ever sees this.
That's right, Mom. You did good.
You did great. You did great. My mom was always like so hippie. She was like, she's like, love. It was like, okay, girls, boys, whatever.
Awesome.
Like full of Jewish lady.
That's amazing. Now I can say, as somebody that grew up with a very conservative Republican father, I mean, we drove around with the Rush Limbaugh bumper sticker on the, you know, and growing up in the Midwest, and my dad would say homophobic things all the time. And of course, you know, I think some of that was designed to try to make an impression on me, because it was pretty clear from a young age that there was something a little different about me going on. And I think he was trying to nip that in the bud. And so it was very painful when even if you have an inkling that there's something different about yourself,
you're like,
you hear your parents expressing that kind of hate, you take that all in. So even as a parent, if you're not directly saying something to your child, but if you're saying anything hateful about anybody, that gets absorbed by the child, and it can become
Huh.
internalized if the child relates at all to those people that you are condemning. So it took a lot of work. And now, before my dad passed away, he really came around, and that's a testament, I think, to our relationship, because in his case, a lot of his homophobia was, of course, based in fear, and it was also based in ignorance, because he really didn't have any personal connections with anybody who belonged to that community. And then
Yeah.
suddenly was a person that he loved instead of just an abstract idea, he became much more accepting. And it got to where, towards the end of his life, if I would go over to my parents' house and my husband wasn't with me, he was pissed, because he loved my husband and wanted to hang out with him. And so it was a really, a big transformation, but it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of undoing of a lot of that pain that happened earlier. So I would also just add, be careful what you say about anybody. You don't want to model
Yeah.
hate for young people, no matter who the target is.
100%. When you explained that beginning part of like drive with the sticker, was it a truck? I envisioned a truck.
It was like a Chevy something or other.
Yes, like double barrel, whatever in the back. The first thing I thought of is like the perseverance of masculinity and toxic masculinity, and how you have to performatively be masculine, and what that means, and like, not to get super like feminist philosophical, but like how dangerous toxic masculinity is, and the belief that like if you're born this way, you have to be the most manliest manly man ever, etc.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
and that I'm sure passes off into other elements of queer life as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
Burn it down.
That's a very difficult box that he was in himself in his life. And I have to think about that too. He was really trying, I think, in his mind, as hurtful as his actions were sometimes, I think he was trying to do what he thought was the right thing. And when I look at it that way, it just puts it in a different light, I guess. And it makes it feel like, knowing how far he came, it gives me hope for others too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Paul, your story is honestly warming my heart a lot, because of the way that it's showing like human beings' capacity for change and growth.
Yes.
And how like even people who at one point are like in a place of like ignorance and hatred about like a certain group of people that they don't understand, how like everybody has the capacity to like grow and change and like expand their heart and get to like see the beauty of all humanity.
Right, absolutely. And that's not, every family's different. That's not to say every parent is going to come that far, or that you're doing something wrong if your parent doesn't do that. People, every journey is different, but I think that no matter what, it's worth it to be yourself. And whether people accept it or not, when I first came out, I really thought it was going to mean losing my connection to my parents, but at that point it was worth it to me, because I couldn't live any other way any longer.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, of course.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's so freeing to get to like live your truth and to realize that like your own life and like experience in the world is ultimately like for you.
Yes.
And like you have to show up for yourself, and like people who's and yeah. I'm trying to say something about like not living your life for other people, but I think you get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's a hard transition too, because when you're a kid, that's how you kind of learn how to be a human, is by being validated by other people around you. You have to sort of look to and learn. So, and then at a certain point, you have to start to use yourself as the gauge instead of other people, and that's hard. I think I still catch myself sometimes looking for validation from somebody else, because we kind of want that as human beings sometimes, but
Absolutely.
we have to decide for ourselves what's right.
yeah, and when we're a kid, that like validation that we're getting from our parents gets linked to our survival, because like our parents are a symbol of like food and shelter and like
Got to keep mom and dad happy, right?
exactly, yeah, and we like internalize that, and then like when we grow up we can start associating like everybody's opinions of us with like our survival.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this, along those lines too, I mean, it's easy for me to kind of, now I'm a gay married man living in California. I don't have a lot of problems now. It's fine. But growing up in the Midwest, of course, there was a lot. And I get a lot of hate comments and stuff, that I'm used to that. But I also get a lot of messages from young people who live in other parts of the world, who find my artwork and connect to it and share a little bit about what it's like living in different places that are far less accepting than anywhere here in the US, places where people fear for their lives if anybody finds out that they are different somehow. And I have a lot of really powerful conversations about that. And I've tried to encourage a lot of young artists, and I've talked with them and sent them information about how to apply to come to schools over here so they can be freer to be themselves. There's actually one young guy who did. He messaged me on Instagram when he was in high school, and we talked for a long time. And then I sent him stuff like, well, you need to get out of there, come somewhere else where you can be yourself. And then he messaged me like 6 months later and said, well, guess what? I got a full scholarship. I'm coming to the Art Institute of Chicago. And I
Yay!
thought, amazing. But those conversations too have helped me realize, as much progress as we feel like we've made here, there are places in the world where that progress is not happening at the same pace, and we can't leave people behind. I mean, the story in the news just last week about the young guy that was beheaded after people in his family found out that he was gay, I think it was. But we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and that's reminding me of this kind of like pressure and narrative in society that like queer people's lives have to be moving towards coming out at some point.
Yeah.
That can be like, and how like a life before coming out is like false and bad, and like you're like not being honest enough or what have you. But like it is so unfair to like expect queer and trans people to announce ourselves if it's going to be unsafe for us to do so. And like not everybody has to come out. Like yeah, people should not have to like tell this truth if it's going to like cause them more harm than comfort and safety.
There's no right or wrong way to be a part of this community.
Yes.
And queer covers all communities, right? Like it's everywhere. It's not just within like cis white appearing, etc. Right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how like it's really easy to share this story like within this setting with other queer people, right? But when it like changes, for instance, let's say like I'm with like work colleagues who are friends, but they're all like very, very hetero and maybe don't have like that much exposure to queer or like beyond, it's hard to share these stories because it's immediately like a monolith of like, oh, well, you're this, so that means that this is what you are. And then there's like, you can see their like everything happening, and you're like, no.
wait.
Yeah. This is not everybody. Like, this is just my journey, and it might change tomorrow. And like, and so my like something I often think about is like how it's not my responsibility, but like how can I like help the people that I do care about who don't have the most exposure understand that like there is no end goal, like just as you said, Edmund, like there's no start, beginning, finish, wherever everyone's on their own journey. Like there is no monolith, right?
The process of like becoming and growing and like learning more about ourselves never ends. And like that doesn't just apply to queer and trans folks, that applies to everyone. The process of being a human being and growing and changing never ends. We can continue to do it our whole lives, and that's beautiful and that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I encourage everyone to do it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.